Welcome. This is a special edition of the Bold Business Podcast with your host Jess Dewell. From time to time, she appears on other podcast, radio, and live stream programs. As part of our Fast Track Your Business initiative, we want to share some of these conversations with you, our valued audience, especially when the discussion will help you find your own company's true north. And now, with permission, here is today's special guest podcast featuring Jess Dewell.
Hey, it's Jess Dewell here. I'm the managing partner at Red Direction, and I host and produce the Bold Business Podcast. This is where I share stories, tips, and concepts that help business leaders achieve short-term goals and increase confidence in their long-term positioning, aka success. And if you want to learn how to transform your sales team from order takers to quota breakers to significantly increase your revenue and to create scalable sales systems, you should be listening to the Authentic Persuasion Show with my good friend, Jason Cutter.
Welcome to the Authentic Persuasion Show, a place where business and thought leaders come to weigh in on important sales-related topics that you can use in your sales career and life. I'm your host, Jason Cutter. My mission is to get your help in changing sales from something prospects fear to an active service they actually seek out and appreciate. Whether you're in sales, leading sales teams, or own a business, I hope this helps you improve your selling effectiveness and you can go out into the world as an authentic persuader. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another guest episode of the Authentic Persuasion Show. My special guest today is Jess Dewell. Jess brings over 20 years of advising and consulting experience with strategy, operations, and helping where that intersects, right? The strategy, the operations, the tactical, and the strategic. She is your strategic advisor, and she specializes in working with companies at critical points in development where they want to make the right decisions right now and then moving forward. And she is here so we can talk about marketing messages versus what sales tells their customers, right? So that dialogue, self-centered motives, being bought into the mission, into organizations, and wherever else this conversation is going to go. Jess, welcome to the Authentic Persuasion Show.
Thanks, Jason, for having me here today. And I love it, wherever this conversation is going to go.
I already know that based on the times we've talked before, like who knows where this is going to go. So let's talk about the first part. And I think it's a common theme. And I guess maybe once it stops being a common issue in organizations, I'll stop bringing it up or stop talking about it, but it just keeps happening, is this intersection or this point at which marketing is saying one thing, branding is saying one thing, the message to the consumer is one thing that they're experiencing prior to engaging with the company, right? It's that beginning, that first part. Then they get to sales, and then sales says different things or a different message or promises different things. In your experience, why does that happen? And then more importantly, what can organizations do about it?
Yeah, that's such a big topic. I tell you what, Jason. So I think we could start here, is that the purpose of getting somebody to realize they have a problem and a pain point and they really want to get a solution and they know something about what they've seen or heard in the messaging, in the marketing, in the advertising that has occurred, makes them want to call, is important. And then fundamentally, the conversation that a salesperson has is going to be slightly different. Their job is to go, yeah, oh, I totally get your pain. And yeah, you're right. You are making the right choice by using our company because we can solve that problem. The thing is, what ends up happening is the way the implementation occurs to keep the customer experience going may get lost in translation from the very beginning to the salesperson into the organization and the onboarding and the servicing over time. And that's where communication is really important. So whatever we can do to align marketing, driving those leads, salespeople saying yes and, onboarding team knowing what the yes ands, all those ands could be, actually are, then we create a consistent experience. So part of that strategy, that higher level strategy that comes into place, is all about what is our mission and how do we do our work. If we know those two things, what is our mission and how do we do our work, that means any sort of objections, issues, setup for onboarding can happen at that sales place. So pain plus here's how it's actually going to look, plus actually looking the way we said it was going to look, creates longer relationships with our customers, which we need because there's always downward price pressure. There's always new market entrants. There's always something, technology changes, regulation. Who knows what we're going to face? Who knows how we're going to face it? But when we know our lane, and I had a mentor say to me once, when all of our butterflies are flying in the same direction, we know we can get to the end goal together. And marketing and sales are a big part of that. Onboarding is a big part of that. And is there a willingness to have all of those people in all of those roles on that same lane? Prioritizing that is important.
How do you get the butterflies to fly in the same direction? Yes, having a mission is great, right?
Yep.
And many companies do. They have a mission. Maybe it's on the wall. Maybe it's printed in the handbook. It's in the manual.
And that's all it is.
Maybe some of their people actually know what it is. So part of it would be getting everybody to understand what the mission is and being bought into that. Humans work best with incentives. So how do you incentivize or drive that culture to take on that mission as a collective group of special butterflies?
I'm working with a company right now who has an incentivized part of the team, and they're now starting to add some people who incentive is part of the culture, but there's no direct incentive opportunity available because they're not involved. They're more of an admin role versus an active role as far as an economic engine within a company goes. So we've been asking the questions as the consultant with the leadership team. Well, what does the impact look like? What are those measures for success? How does that tie into, and in this case, it's about profit sharing. So their bonus structure and their other things are more around when we all do good, we all win. When we're not doing as great, we all have to help each other to get better. So that's how they've chosen to do some incentivization. And now they're going to have somebody coming in a new department that is a little different that they want to incentivize that they've never incentivized before. And they recognize the need for it based off of the turnover over there in the past. And so we have to ask a little bit of a bigger question. Well, what is my impact to our mission? How do I actually show up and make sure that the pain point is something we can solve in the way that this person thinks that they can solve it? Marketing, how qualified are the people coming in with the pain can we actually solve? And onboarding, we're actually able to do what was said before and deliver a consistent message. So there's beating that mission into submission, and we all know it, but then there's actually living it. And Jason, I'm a big proponent of, well, if we don't know our contribution to solving the problem, all we're doing is work. We can only make impact as an individual or a team by choice. And I think that's part of even setting it up or making change is who's in to make the choice.
It's so interesting because I don't think about that point very much, but it's so amazing for anyone listening or watching this, that part where if you don't understand your impact as a part of the mission or the organization or the whole machine, then you're just doing work. And I think that's so valid because that's what a lot of people do is they end up just going to work to do the work, right? And working their hours and then working for the weekend and then being done and can't wait for the weekend and dreading Mondays. And it's just work. They just see this work as this dirty word and they're just putting in the effort, exchange for money, and then they're doing their thing. And it's interesting when you talk about that, because I'm thinking also, if you look at any organization, any group as a whole, right? Let's say even like a military group or a family or a city or a town or a school, anything like that. If people are disconnected with the mission or the purpose of that big group, they're just putting in effort. They don't understand. Like, let's say construction, right? There's the story of the two bricklayers. One bricklayer says, "What are you building?" "Oh, I'm just building bricks and I'm building this thing." The other one's like, "What are you building?" "Well, I'm building a cathedral for this bigger purpose." And then they understand what they're doing. And I love how you're tying that in with the mission and the team members.
And we are doing the best that we can. And sometimes we have to lead and own and take responsibility and be accountable right where we are. One thing that we can do then is if we think about our role and the impact that we're making, if we don't know, we can ask, but we might not get the result or the output we want, or it might be the same old, or whatever the case may be, right? We all have issues and we all have times we get to focus on that. And there's other times we just don't focus on that. So what can we do? If we know what we want to do and we know who we're talking to, we know how we're going to create the impact for our customers, then we have a beginning and a middle and an end. The beginning is what is marketing saying right now? And do I understand how that ties to the problem we solve? And then when I'm talking to the customer in the middle, salespeople, that I can actually address, set up, understand, talk logistics, and know who I'm talking to in that organization to make them really understand how it all works together and give them the tools, because sometimes the people we talk to in that middle step aren't the people who actually get the output result. And if there's a disconnect between what we say we can do and the actual measurement that we're actually able to give to that customer, that's totally out of our control and it's 2 steps removed. So how we show up to that and talk about it is important. The end is giving it to the onboarding team, giving it to the account management team, or however that works in that organization. And it could all be you, but recognizing I'm in the beginning, I'm in the middle, I'm in the end of that sales process. And then each one of those has a process within it. And if we have that, we know when we get to start over. We have a place to reflect from. We have a decision to go, well, how'd that go? And what can I learn and take forward to the next one to do better? Because if I feel like I'm punching a clock, that's fine if that's really what you want. To Jason's point, we're all called to something bigger. And so why not be curious about how we can do that in the role we find ourselves in to get us the best person that we can be right now, right here.
I love it. And from what you're talking about, the takeaway I have for leaders out there is the transparency and the awareness to make sure everybody doesn't just feel like a cog in the machine, and they understand their point and their place, even if it is a cog in the machine, what they're doing and the end results. And if you're in any department where you're disconnected from the final result, right? Somewhere in the machine is somebody who's doing the work or sees the customer succeed, right? At whatever it is. So that person has the benefit of, okay, this is great. I see the results all day. If you're before that stage, is asking questions, being aware, and spending as much time as you can with maybe those other departments. If I've always thought that was a good idea, have people work in customer service, in fulfillment, whatever that is, from sales, and see, okay, this is what I'm selling, right? This is what we're actually doing for people.
Mm-hmm. So important. Your cathedral builder reminded me of the Kent Follett trilogy. I don't know if you've read that. It's a historical fiction trilogy that talks about the fact that the people who were actually starting to build the cathedrals really never lived to see the result of what they did. And to your point exactly, well, we've got the option. How cool is it? We can call somebody up on the phone when it's possible and we're in the same space. We can walk down the hall. Who knew? And to the point of leaders specifically, let me just address this, is that our actions as leaders are what people buy into. They're the reason that they stay at our company, or they're the reason that they look someplace else. Salespeople are an amazing, important group of people that are often misused and overlooked, I think. Oh, it's just the function and here it is. And this is what they do. And you know what? They are our frontline people. From the messages we put out, from the experiences that customer service gets, they're handling it all. Talk about a wealth of information right in that middle step of confirming, yes, we can solve your problem and we want to solve your problem. And here's how that could look. And I think that empowering and changing that message a little bit for marketing to know, well, this is what the sales role is going to be here, whatever that sales role is. And yours might look very different than what I just described. And that's okay, because as long as marketing knows what that compartment is, as long as each person working in that space knows what that is, we can now align together. Okay, it makes me think of Des Moines, Jason. The first time I ever went to Des Moines, it was in January and February, and it was windy and icy outside. And it was the first city I had ever been to, having spent a lot of time in Chicago, having spent a lot of time in Minneapolis, outside in the suburbs, that when you're in downtown Des Moines, they have these cool bridges that are built between the skyscrapers so that you don't have to walk out in the weather. That's why it reminds me of Des Moines. We have that ability as a salesperson, as a marketing person, as an onboarding person, as a leader to go, where does it best make sense to have these walkways to make sure that we have an open flow of communication separate from whatever's whirling and twirling around us all the time.
And the big thing for salespeople watching or listening to this that I'm taking away from this as a great reminder is understand your part in the success of the client as an end result, and how that success of the client fits in with the mission of the organization. If you don't clearly know that, then spend some time asking, researching, finding other people, asking your leadership team so that you can get connected. Because then when you do that, A, you're going to promise the right things from a sales perspective, and B, it's going to shift into something bigger as far as the overall mission instead of just a job and just work and just a commission. And then for the leaders listening and watching is to ensure that everyone understands the mission, and not just the first day when they're going through their onboarding and somebody tells them what the mission is and that's the last time they see it, but actually living it and breathing it, and then making sure that the culture is there and the incentives are there to make sure everyone's rowing in the right direction. And so speaking of those incentives, one of the things I know that I wanted to chat with you about is we're all human. And so one of the human tendencies that we all have is to be self-centered and self-motivated. It's great ideologically to be part of a whole and selfless, but we're all humans. It's all about our own survival. So
Absolutely. It's all about survival. I'm going to tell you the story of Yellowstone. They're doing research and they reintroduced the wolves to Yellowstone. Talk about an amazing, vast national forest that millions and millions of people go to, not only from the United States, more millions come to visit our national park, Yellowstone, from around the world. And the wolves had been put on the endangered list because they had been removed. And granted, there was a conflict between nature and agriculture, and we had to work that out because people's livelihoods were at stake. So I'm not telling you the story from the political part of it. I'm telling you the story because we think that Yellowstone was fantastic as it was with no wolves. Well, scientists and biologists and all the ists that work in nature were looking at this, and somebody says, well, let's save the wolves. Let's reintroduce the wolves and see what happens. By doing that, all kinds of things changed. Problems that were trying to be solved by all of these amazing, dedicated scientists changed. The reintroduction of just that one element made rivers change differently because there was population control of small critters. The small critters were eating all of the greens that were on the edges of the banks, which made nothing able to grow, so that the rivers kind of spread out and there was erosion and nothing then would grow there. Talk about some of the middle-sized creatures as well. They started to move into different parts of the park and they acted differently. So not only did rivers change, not only did population control start to naturally happen, things that hadn't grown and animals that hadn't stayed longer and had been other animals that had been impacted by missing wolves came back. Something that we had that was beautiful that everybody wanted to see got better. All the wolves did was be wolves and put back in there. So to the point, Jason, of what you're talking about, each person has a role. We have a thing we're doing. We have something that we want. Our job may be the way to get there. It may be a skill we want to learn. Maybe we do want to be part of something bigger. But in the end, if we can't put food on our own tables, and if we can't live the lifestyle that our role allows us to live, we get out of balance and out of whack. So we may be really cool, but think of how cool, even within our own selves, that we have to become rededicated to what is our job here and how can we be the best at it? And how can we use it to go forward in such a way that everybody else is doing the same thing? We're just moving in the same direction. We've hitched our own personal missions to this one bigger one, this company we all happen to work for. So you can totally be self-absorbed, driven by incentive, having a great time doing it, and still recognize that by looking around and seeing what's around us, we could have something better. Think about how if we had a conversation with somebody in a different department that could make our lives easier, when somebody comes in and says, I have this problem, and we have to figure out how to sell it, and it's really not something that we can do well, but that's what all these leads are turning out to want. Now what? Right? We have to be willing to have that conversation so that we can do our part of our ecosystem within our company to survive. Because if we are selling something we're not, they're not going to stay around. That's probably influencing result, our incentive. Yet, what if we could make them last longer? It makes our company stronger. It makes our relationship and our reputation in the world stronger, which means what? It's easier to sell.
I love it.
How do you like that, Jason?
I was wondering where you were going with the wolf thing, because I was like, that is not what I want salespeople to think, that they're the wolves.
No, but think how
part of
powerful
the
they are.
ecosystem. Yeah.
Part of the ecosystem. And wolves are powerful. They're amazing. They have a purpose. And so we could do it in any ecosystem. I mean, I'm sure there's some microbe in our body we could put ourselves in that capacity too. Yes, the point is the ecosystem and owning our role in the ecosystem, being who we are at our core.
If there's one thing I know, it's that sales is full of failure. Even if you're a Hall of Fame level sales professional, you can make a great income despite losing more than you're winning. If there's one aspect of sales that most people fear, and what keeps a lot of people even wanting to get into sales, it's getting hit with objections. That is why I wrote my latest book, The Sales Consultant Guide to Overcoming Objections, Yours and Theirs. This is the first in my new series of short books, guides filled with what you need for helping you improve your selling effectiveness. No fluff, no long-winded stories, no filler to make it seem more valuable, just actual foundation-building strategies to help you become aware of the true nature of why your prospects bring up objections, the different type of objections, and then specific ways to overcome them that are universal to most any sales process, product, service, or style. Go to Amazon.com today and get your copy of A Sales Consultant's Guide to Overcoming Objections. Or, if you'd rather, as a gift to the listeners of this podcast, email me at jason@cutterconsultinggroup.com, and I'll send you a complimentary full version of it as my thank you for listening and supporting this show. And then I'm looking at it from the bigger picture, which is that balance, right? So too many wolves means there's not enough other creatures. And so then it's going to balance, and then the wolf population is going to go down. And so there's got to be there's this balance. So what do you suggest then, or tell companies, your clients, from the corporate company strategy, higher level perspective, when they're trying to balance that ecosystem, incentivize people, understanding that people are going to be self-centered, which is just our nature, and that's okay. And then how do you make that a valuable part of a mission-driven organization that has a strategy or a direction it wants to go?
Well, we have to look at what the incentives are encouraging behavior-wise. We act in accordance with what we value, period. And when we act in accordance with what we value, that means it doesn't matter what comes out of our mouth. It doesn't matter what somebody tells us. And the outcomes of what we do, if it's rewarded, if it's shaped, if it is reprimanded, doesn't really matter. That's what shapes our culture, whatever the response to our actions are. So from a strategic level, it's incredibly important that we're looking at what are we rewarding? Are we rewarding the success metrics to actually deliver on our mission? Which, by the way, that is a very strategic approach. That's not just like a numbers thing. That's a big conversation. Are we rewarding the behaviors that we want in the messaging that goes out, the behaviors we want in the way that we say yes and how we transition to the next stage? Once we've said yes, are we part of that next step or not? How connected? How disconnected? And are there different incentives for different groups? And are we accidentally saying, yes, you can do this, but no, you can't do that within the same department? That does happen sometimes. Actually happens a lot. It happens in families. It happens in neighborhoods. It happens in all kinds of things. Somebody's getting special treatment somewhere. To your point, Jason, we remember the special treatment and we go, well, we want that special treatment. So why not us too? And then we're getting behaviors that are out of alignment with our values that take us away from our mission. And so strategically, do our actions line us up with having the best output of our mission and solving somebody's problem?
So true. I see that a ton. And I can just imagine, like, with what you're doing and working with, like that incentives where it's do this and you're not supposed to do this, but you're incentivized to. I see that a lot, especially with sales teams, where the compensation and the incentives don't take into account also what you don't want. So a lot of times, for anybody listening or watching this that's running a sales team or an organization, is that compensation plan that's only rewarding one behavior, and that one behavior then leaves open a lot of other behaviors you don't want, which is just get us lots of sales. Are those going to be truthful sales? Are those compliant sales? Are those clients we actually want? Are they being told the right things and are they successful? Or are they just going to cancel tomorrow? because they were promised a bunch of crap.
Right. Oh, I'm telling you, I love to sell. There are a lot of organizations I don't like the way they sell, and I don't like what I'd have to subscribe to if I was in that organization. Cool thing is, you get to have a different opinion. Cool thing is, our listeners and watchers get to have a different opinion. And it's all of those things when we know what we want and we know what we're good at and we know what we're willing to contribute to, it takes us all.
Yeah, I love it. I know that we have talked about in the past, and I think it's interesting. I wanted to get your perspective from the strategy advisor, kind of like that high level looking at everything, is where companies are either successful or not successful in the framework of curiosity, where that plays into just general performance results. I don't want to just say success, but where does curiosity fit into all of this within organizations, within teams?
That's one of my personal values, Jason, is curiosity. And how does it fit in? It fits in at the individual. It fits in at you and me and everybody who's with us at this program right now. And Nick, my dog, who's going to be in the background apparently for just a few minutes. And the reason that curiosity becomes important is because it comes back to, well, what can I learn? What do I want? And why do I care? If you just answered those three questions in any order, great. Where am I going? What do I want? If I know what I want, I can now be able to communicate that out a little differently. I can be able to communicate that out and say, oh, this really my want really doesn't align with the mission of this company. All right, what does that actually mean? And am I willing to take action for myself in that role? That's very curious. By the way, it's also very courageous. It's also incredibly powerful because we get to control our own destiny. And sometimes I think we forget that. We go to our job, we do our thing, whatever the good, the bad, and the ugly is, we just take it. Well, yes, and what about what we want? And then when we put ourselves in the center, we can have those bigger conversations. We can be on the lookout for how do we go forward? How do we get to where we want to go? And another great big thing about curiosity is we know we're not like our grandparents where they had the same job at the same company. We know that many of us aren't going to be like our parents, where some of our parents, and I think some of us, will still be in the same industry. We just may be in different variants of our field. So we may swap industries with the same specialization, if that makes sense. And so wherever we happen to be and whatever we're doing, as long as we show up with curiosity, we have the ability to go, here's how I can contribute right now. Here's how that helps me, my family, my community, whatever that is for me right now. And I don't care about 5 years from now. That's kind of a hard thing to say. Can I say I don't care about 5 years from now? Yeah, because I want to take action that helps me right now. Do I want to make sure my action aligns with 5 years from now for myself? Sure. But my decision today, is that really going to make an output for 5 years from now? No. Curiosity. What can I do right now? How do I get the skill I want right now? How do I get what I want right now?
Yeah, I guess the two biggest areas I see that as you're talking about, I'm thinking about it for salespeople, sales teams. One is the complacency, which is I'm just used to what I'm doing it. I'm not really curious about anything outside of it. Just let me do my thing. And then the other part is, and I see this even more, in fact, I was chatting with someone yesterday about it, is if you're in sales long enough, if you're not careful, you will get desensitized to your customers, to their problems, to their situations, because you've heard it all before. You've heard the stories. You assume that everyone's going to want what you have, and you're no longer curious about them, the value. Kind of goes back to what we were talking about, where understanding the actual result for your customers and being curious. Like the people I've seen the most successful in sales are generally also the most curious about the different parts, the customer and the company, and how that fits in. How do you create that? How do you foster that? Or is that something you're hiring for? I mean, is that a nature or a nurture in a corporate culture environment, or both?
So I'm going to answer it two ways, because there's the culture thing that anybody who has curiosity will lose it if the culture of the company does not foster it, period. That's all there is. Goes back to the ecosystem. We can have a really amazing ecosystem, but what if this amazing piece comes along and it could be so much better? And it is for a while, but it gets snuffed out because it's not there anymore. So there is definitely a culture piece, and how we do our work and the way that work is done that comes into play about curiosity. Now, as an individual person, in whatever role I happen to be in, and I'm thinking about us in the role of salesperson right now, Jason, is that when I can be curious, I can find so many different ways that my product can actually solve a problem, that I might find new ways over time that allow marketing to reach more people, that allow things to make onboarding a lot easier. And so if I can recognize that by being the go-to person and being curious will help me be present with a customer, who knows what I might discover. And that means when nobody else can solve somebody's problem, I'm going to be the one they bring to the table. How cool if that would be you?
I love it. And it does take those two things, right? One is the salesperson, the individual, the marketer, the customer service, anybody in the chain having that curiosity kind of framework inside of them, which I also feel is something you can grow and develop. Some people are like, I'm not very curious. I think you can. For me, I was curious about the world and science and animals as a kid, but not people. People and I didn't really get along too well as a kid. And then over time, I became really curious about people in that same way and use those and develop that. So I think anything is possible. But I know what you mean too. The organization has to have a culture and the space that they appreciate curiosity. Because I've seen organizations where it's like, stop being curious, stop asking questions. It doesn't matter about this. No, we're not going to change that. Like, stop giving us your opinions. Just make your widget, right? Just shut up and make your widget all day. And it's going to be tough for anyone to stay very long in that kind of an organization if they're curious.
And I will tell you, that's okay, by the way, for all of those curious people out there. I've taken on those roles before, some unknowingly at the time, but for the challenge, turned to be great lessons come out of that. How curious am I? Am I really willing to figure out what can happen? And the answer is, did I ever make an impact within an organization? No. But did I have a really good time serving the clients I got to serve and making relationships with those clients? Absolutely. And sometimes we just have to turn it inward and come up with the way to use and foster curiosity, even when it's not welcome or even when it's not encouraged. Because to your point, Jason, we don't want to get complacent. We don't want to be like, oh, I've heard it all before. Because here's the deal. I deal with the same problems in every single company. Every single company thinks they're incredibly unique. And by the way they created the problems is absolutely positively unique, which means part of the solution will be the same for everybody. Part of the solution is going to be unique to the way they created their problem in the first place. And it's up to me to figure out, how did you really create this problem? What's the one question we can ask ourselves? How did you get here? And maybe ask, what else have you tried? Understand their thinking. If you just had 2 questions to ask everybody, you never know what you're going to uncover. And then you're going to have more questions than you could ever want if you keep that up after a while.
Yeah, which is that curiosity piece.
And how to develop it.
Yeah, and just developing that as a muscle and being open to it, and also not overthinking it. A lot of times people overthink it and they restrict that curiosity because they're trying to control it versus just seeing what happens, if you will, and exploring it. Shifting a little bit, what does authenticity mean to you?
Knowing what you value, the way that it looks, the way that it sounds, what it's like when it's missing, and then embodying it to the best of our ability with the energy and the attention that we happen to have in the moment. And we're not always going to live our values 100%, but when we bring our best of whatever we have in the moment to what it looks like and sounds like, when it's missing, we know, and when it's there, we know.
I love it. That's awesome. So concise. Right? That's fantastic.
I don't think I've ever said it that way before. So there you go. I might have to clip this out and reuse it.
We'll get you a copy of that. Well, and it's interesting because I can tell when some people kind of thought about it or have kind of put that together, and I could tell that just flowed out of you. So we'll get you a copy of that so you can use that. On the other side of the authentic persuasion equation, what does persuasion mean to you, and where has it been a part of what you're doing now, what you've done in the past, where that fits in?
I don't know if there's really a lot of persuasion in what I do. I think there's an element of it for sure. I think in my case, for me personally, it's about the curiosity piece. And it makes me think of Eleanor Roosevelt. One of her quotes was, one's philosophy isn't best expressed in words, it's expressed in the choices that we make, which is kind of the basis of our whole conversation here. And so if I'm making choices to be curious and I'm making choices to be present, then the opportunity to know exactly when and where and what to say show up. And it comes out of a place of service, which is an element of persuasion because I'm looking for the right places to put it in if it makes sense. Yet I can still come from a very relationship place. I can come from a very service-based place. I can come from a very I've got to get this sale because this is dependent on me paying my electric bill. I mean, all of those things and all of those viewpoints can come from that one place, the choices we make.
Well, and I would say that you're definitely more persuasive than you think, especially if you're getting people to shift their culture and put strategies in place. For you and what you're seeing organizations do, especially what's been happening over the last 10, 11, 12 months with the economy, with the pandemic, right? And in the beginning, it was affecting some more than others. Now it's just a thing that's just a reality in some way for everybody. What do you see the companies who you feel are the most successful right now and have adapted, are dealing with this? What are they doing that you feel like sets them apart from the ones who aren't as successful?
They're making an effort to do the things that take more time. We're working in a place where there's always been some sort of remote. Sales teams are becoming more remote. Yet with everybody else becoming remote, it's becoming clear that we all don't do remote the same. And remote isn't the same in terms of being able to create something where we know our mission and we know how our mission fits into this bigger mission. And so the companies that are doing things right recognized early on, oh, this is going to be different in some way. How is it going to be different for us? Where are our edges that we're like, now we're flying off the cliff compared to, oh, okay, it's different. We don't know what it's going to be. We're going to figure out how to show up to it. And I think that that's a big piece when we're talking about connecting with a remote team. There is different infrastructure that must occur that people take for granted, that it could just be Zoom, or it could just be a cell phone, or it could just be an internet connection. And it's always so much more than that. It's our human connection, to the point of being authentically persuasive. And so if we're not willing to put in the time, we're failing as a company. When we're putting the time into our people and we're putting the time into the processes with which that make us connected and successful, whatever success looks like to our company, then we're not only authentic in ourselves and allow people not to be worried about it, but we're authentic as a company at the same time.
And what are those companies who are doing that, who are investing the time in this shift or anything? You're talking about this shift to virtual and remote. I'm thinking about that in the same way if you were starting up a new department or a new team, right? Like the effort you would put into it versus, hey, everyone, you're just remote. Good luck. And let us know if you need anything, where you wouldn't do that if you were starting up a new team or a new department.
So you might need extra support, Because the people who were on the team in an established thing are very different than the people who can start up a team. And so to your point, Jason, what resources do we have? What do we need? Are we willing to go that extra mile to do that? And by the way, if we find ourselves out there flailing around at any point in time, pandemic or otherwise, we just have to remember, put up our little white flags and say, help me. It's a two-way street. Our companies want to take care of us to the best of their ability. But if we don't say we need help, we're missing out on an opportunity to connect as well.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I see a lot of people who feel like they are expected to know the answers to everything and understand it all and solve all their problems. I'll speak for myself. My experience of myself and others is that most people think they've got to solve it all themselves. That's why something like even therapy is thought in our heads to be frowned upon, because then I'm asking for help and like that's not effective, or that's a bad sign about me. Here's the biggest thing. This is what I always tell people, especially if there's a change, if we're doing something different, or in situations like this, and people don't like change, but the company wants that change or is making that change happen. Remember, the company needs you to succeed. If you work for a company and you're failing, that means they're missing out. And as a business, they're in the business of succeeding and making money and being successful. So they want you to be successful. And now if it's clear they don't want you to be successful, then you're at the wrong organization and there's plenty of fish in the sea. But fundamentally, always remember, like if you're having a challenge, go to your managers, go to your boss, go up the chain till you find somebody who can help you, and don't go it alone. I mean, I think that's huge.
Right. Going back to the Yellowstone example, the ecosystem of all the people who were coming in to go, well, how do we solve the problems of this particular ecosystem as it is, are there in a company today. They're looking, where are the problems we see? We're trying to figure out how to solve them. Sometimes all we have to do is step up and say, over here.
Yeah. And that's it. And especially now virtual, a lot of people are on their own little islands at home or wherever they're at. And don't be afraid to ask. Don't hesitate. Again, If you want to succeed, and that's your intentions behind it, not just complaining, not just whining about the situation, but actually wanting help so that you can succeed, the company wants you to succeed as well.
Yes.
All right, shifting gears one more time. Obviously, I'm just going to take a guess. You, as a kid, didn't think, I want to grow up and be a strategic advisor and consultant. What was it that little Jess wanted to be when she grew up?
My list is still long. I wanted to be a nun. I wanted to be president of the United States. I wanted to be a biochemist. I wanted to be a fighter pilot in the Air Force. I wanted to be a cross-country trucker. I think that one could still happen before I retire and say I'm just done working. Or maybe I'll do it for fun. I don't know. But the list was long, Jason.
I think most of those could still happen for sure. Were those all different phases, or were that at once? Are you just like super motivated?
Well, some, because whatever's in front of me is my favorite, because there's something cool I can learn everywhere. Don't get me wrong about that. Usually there were influential people in my life that were those things. One of my great aunts was a nun, and she was the most compassionate person I knew and the most non-judgmental person I knew. My grandpa was in the Air Force, and he created the parts that made up our fighter jets, like the B-2. He worked on the stealth bomber. And so I always wanted to fly the stuff he made. That was kind of the thing I wanted to do. And my dad's best friend in high school drove trucks for a while, and he used to come to our house when I was a kid, and he was funny, and he always had these great stories from being on the road. And I'm like, why couldn't I do that too? So the excitement that comes from the people in our lives that give us inspiration is sometimes overlooked, and it might be a place to start for curiosity. Notice it started at an early age for me.
Yeah, I love it. What's your personal definition of success?
This is going to sound a little bit like a repeat. This is it. When I am living to the things that I value the most, and I'm acting in accordance with that, and I show up to every conversation, the easy, the hard, the known, the unknown, with who I am, because if I know who I am in the moment, I can be a better listener. I can be more empathetic. I can be more curious, and I can be whatever needs to be there from a place of self-solidness to allow whatever unfolds to unfold, because that's exactly what it's supposed to be. That's success to me, moment at a time.
Now, there's the conversation or debate. It's usually not too much of a debate, the journey versus the destination. With your definition of success, where do you see that? The journey, the destination, balance, kind of bias? Where does that fit in for you?
Oh, I already know where I'm going to be. I can see it. I have it visioned out there. Georgia O'Keeffe has this great painting of a ladder in I think it's the twilight sky. It's very dark, and it's 5 rungs, and it's just hanging in the air. It's to the stars, but not touching the ground. That's like the next 5 years. You know where you came from. You never know where you're going, but you know you're headed to the stars. And so to me, I know what it looks like. I know when it gets there, I'm like, oh, look, that's a rung. That's so great. And sometimes it passes by and it's like, oh, hi, there it is. I got it. But at the same point in time, it's all about the journey pointed in a direction for impact.
I love it. Jess, thanks for joining. So people know where they can find you and the stuff that you have going on. So your company, the one you work at, is Red Direction. So they can go to reddirection.com. You are also all over LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. So find you there, Jess Dewell. And then you also have a podcast, which we didn't really mention, but they should definitely check out. The podcast is called the Bold Business Podcast, and bold, of course, is in bold. The Bold Business Podcast, which is amazing. So check that out. Anywhere else where you're doing some fun stuff? Any places of other content?
Of content? No. Fun stuff? Yes. You got all the fun content parts. You got it covered, Jason.
All right. Well, maybe that's another show. We'll talk about all the side stuff. So thanks again, Jess, for joining me here and being a part of this conversation, sharing all this wisdom, all this curious, fascinating stuff. I loved it. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks for tuning into the Authentic Persuasion Show. If you found value in this episode, please do 2 things. Subscribe so you can get each new episode, and share this episode with anyone else you know in sales. Together, we can help shift the way sales is done. And if you want to find out more information about how to transform your sales career, or you want help with shifting your sales team from order takers to quota breakers, go to jasoncutter.com. Don't forget that everything in life is sales, and I will catch you on the next episode of the Authentic Persuasion Show.
You've been listening to a special edition of the Bold Business Podcast, showcasing Jess's sought-out expertise. You can put that knowledge to use and chart your own course by taking advantage of the Fast Track Your Business program, your on-demand and just-in-time program to grow your business with direct access to Jess. Visit fasttrackyourbusinesstoday.com. Your preparedness and the right perspective is absolutely necessary to navigate an ever-changing business landscape. Thanks for listening.